When the security guard grabbed my arm at my own son's wedding reception, I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I simply smiled, walked to my car, and made 3 phone calls that would change everything. By the time Kevin and Vanessa cut their cake, their perfect day was already unraveling. What happened next? Nobody saw it coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The invitation had arrived 4 months earlier, thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering that screamed expensive taste. Kevin, Mitchell and Vanessa Hartley request the honor of your presence. My hands had trembled holding it, not from joy, but from the weight of what that piece of paper represented. Another milestone I'd funded but wouldn't truly be part of. I remember sitting in my kitchen in Church Hill, the morning sun cutting through the old lace curtains Frank had hung 20 years ago, before cancer took him and left me with insurance money I'd foolishly believed would secure my future. The invitation sat on the table next to my calculator and a stack of bank statements I'd been avoiding for months. It was time to face the numbers. Graduate school at Virginia Commonwealth University. $87,000 because Kevin had dreams of becoming an architect, and what mother wouldn't support her son's dreams? I'd cashed out part of Frank's life insurance for that, told myself it was an investment in Kevin's future, in our family's legacy. The engagement ring upgrade came next. Vanessa's original ring, the one Kevin had saved 6 months to buy, apparently wasn't suitable for someone marrying into the Hartley family. $8,500 for a larger diamond because Diane Hartley had made comments at the engagement party about clarity and carat weight, and Kevin had come to me with tears in his eyes, begging for help so he wouldn't embarrass Vanessa in front of her family. I'd taken out a reverse mortgage on this house for that ring. The house where Frank and I had raised Kevin, where we'd celebrated every Christmas morning, where I'd nursed my husband through his final days. I'd signed papers putting my home at risk so my son's fiancé could have a rock big enough to impress her mother's country club friends. The townhouse down payment in the Fan District had required another $45,000. Young couples need a good start. Vanessa's father Gregory had said over dinner at the Lakeside Country Club, a dinner where I'd felt completely out of place in my department store dress while Diane dripped in pearls and judgment. Kevin and Vanessa had been looking at apartments, perfectly nice places they could afford on Kevin's starting salary, but Gregory had pulled strings to get them into a prestigious building, and naturally, they needed help with the down payment. I'd sold Frank's vintage car collection for that money. 3 beautifully maintained automobiles he'd spent decades restoring, each one holding memories of Sunday drives and his patient explanations of engine mechanics. Gone to strangers on Craigslist because family comes first. Then came the monthly loans. $1,200 every month for 4 years. Gas money, Vanessa would text. The utilities are higher than we expected. Kevin's car needs repairs. My parents are taking us to the Hamptons and we need appropriate clothes. Always something. Always urgent. Always with the implied threat that if I didn't help, Kevin would be humiliated, their marriage would suffer, I'd be letting my son down. $57,600 in monthly payments. I'd started skipping my own medications to afford it. Blood pressure pills weren't essential, I'd told myself. I was only 67. I was healthy enough. The wedding venue deposit had come due 6 months ago. Maymont Estate, because Vanessa had dreamed of getting married there since childhood, and the Hartleys were contributing so much already, surely I could help with the $15,000 deposit? I'd withdrawn money from my teacher's pension early, paid the penalties and taxes, watched my retirement security evaporate so Vanessa could have her dream venue. The wedding dress alterations, the honeymoon to Bali, the rehearsal dinner upgrades. $3,000 here, $12,000 there. My credit cards had limits I'd never imagined reaching, and now they were maxed out, minimum payments eating what little remained of my monthly pension. $228,300. I'd written it down that morning, staring at the number until it stopped looking real. More than Frank and I had saved in 40 years of teaching. More than our house was worth in this neighborhood. Gone. Poured into a relationship where I was increasingly made to feel like hired help rather than family. My phone rang, startling me from my calculations. Vanessa's number flashed on the screen. "Dorothy," she said, "not Mom, never Mom, even though they'd been engaged for 2 years. We need to discuss the wedding arrangements." "Good morning, Vanessa." I kept my voice steady, pleasant. "What can I help with?" "It's about the seating chart. There's been a complication." A pause, heavy with meaning. "My parents have guests flying in from Connecticut, very important business associates of Daddy's. We're short on space at the main tables." My chest tightened. "I see. Mother thought it would be best if you sat with some of Kevin's cousins from his father's side. You know, the ones from Appalachia. You'd have more in common with them anyway." The dismissal in her voice was casual, practiced. "They're lovely people, just more your speed. I'd met those cousins once at Frank's funeral. Good people who worked with their hands and spoke with accents." Diane Hartley had mocked over cocktails later that evening, not knowing I could hear her through the kitchen door. "Where exactly is this table?" I asked. "Near the service entrance. But it's still a lovely view of the gardens." Her tone suggested the conversation was over, the decision made. I closed my eyes, seeing myself relegated to the back corner with relatives I barely knew while Vanessa's family and their important friends occupied the prominent tables I'd helped pay for. "Kevin, what does Kevin say about this?" "Kevin understands that weddings require compromises." Another pause. "Dorothy, you need to understand something. This day is about me and Kevin starting our new life. My family has certain expectations, certain standards. We can't have anything that might seem out of place or create awkward situations." "Out of place?" "Like a retired teacher who hadn't summered in the Hamptons or graduated from prestigious universities. Like a woman who'd spent her career teaching other people's children to read instead of accumulating the kind of wealth that impressed the Hartley family." "I understand perfectly," I said quietly. "Wonderful. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. Oh, and Dorothy? Please don't wear anything too bright or attention-getting. Pastels are more appropriate for women of a certain age. We want everything to look cohesive in the photos." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my financial ruin, being told what to wear to a wedding I'd bankrupted myself to fund. That evening, I drove to Kevin's townhouse, the one I'd helped buy. I needed to hear from my son that this seating arrangement was truly what he wanted, that he understood what he was asking of me. He answered the door in expensive casual wear, the kind of effortlessly costly clothing that Vanessa insisted he needed for her family's gatherings. "Hey Mom. Everything okay? Can we talk?" I stepped inside without waiting for invitation, taking in the furniture I'd helped purchase, the artwork Vanessa had charged to my credit card because Kevin's taste wasn't sophisticated enough. Kevin glanced toward the stairs where I could hear Vanessa on the phone, her voice carrying that sharp edge it got when she spoke to vendors or service people. "Now's not really a great time. Wedding stress, you know how it is." "I know about the seating chart," I said simply. His face flushed. "Mom, it's complicated. Vanessa's parents have these business connections, and there's politics involved with who sits where. It doesn't mean anything. It means I'm being hidden in the back corner of my own son's wedding. You're being dramatic. He wouldn't meet my eyes. It's just a table assignment. You'll still be there." "Will I?" I asked. "Will I really be there, Kevin? Or will I be tucked away where your new family doesn't have to acknowledge that your mother is just a retired teacher who doesn't fit their image? That's not fair." "Fair?" I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, turned the screen toward him. "Do you want to talk about fair? Do you want to discuss how much of my future I've given up to help you start yours?" He glanced at the numbers, then quickly away. "I never asked you to do all that." "You did. Every time you came to me in tears because Vanessa needed something. Every time you told me how her parents were judging you. Every time you made me feel like I'd be failing you as a mother if I didn't help. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, immaculate in designer loungewear that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," Kevin said quickly. "Mom was just leaving." I looked at my son, really looked at him, trying to find the boy I'd raised. The child who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd held my hand at his father's funeral, who'd promised we'd always be a team. That boy was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned to value appearance over loyalty. "I'll see you at the wedding," I said quietly, and let myself out. /document I've created the opening hook in part 1 of your new story. The narrative establishes Dorothy as the protagonist, introduces the financial exploitation, and sets up the wedding conflict. The story maintains the same emotional structure as the original while being completely different in setting, characters, and specific circumstances. The wedding day arrived with the kind of perfect Virginia spring weather that made people believe in fairy tales. Maymont Estate gleamed in the afternoon sunshine, its historic gardens bursting with azaleas and dogwood blossoms. Luxury cars lined the circular drive as guests in designer clothing made their way toward the ceremony lawn. I sat in my 12-year-old Honda Civic in the parking area, watching through my rearview mirror as the world I'd paid for unfolded without me. I'd followed Vanessa's instructions about my clothing. A pale lavender dress from Dillard's clearance rack, modest and forgettable. Pearl earrings Frank had given me on our 20th anniversary. Sensible shoes because I'd be standing a long time in that back corner table near the service entrance. I looked exactly like what the Hartley family wanted me to be. Invisible. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. I took my seat in the last row, far behind Gregory and Diane Hartley, who occupied the front with their society friends. Vanessa's brother Preston stood as best man, his Wall Street suit probably costing more than my monthly pension. The bridesmaids wore silk and shades of blush and champagne, each dress a small fortune. Then Vanessa appeared, and I had to admit she looked stunning. The dress I'd helped pay for alterations on fit her perfectly, trailing behind her in a cascade of French lace and pearl beading. She floated down the aisle on Gregory's arm while a string quartet played something classical and expensive. Kevin waited at the altar in his custom tuxedo, and for a moment, my heart broke all over again. He looked so much like Frank standing there. Same strong jawline, same nervous habit of touching his collar. But Frank had never looked at me the way Kevin gazed at Vanessa. Like she was something precious he'd won rather than someone he cherished as an equal. The ceremony was everything money could buy. The officiant spoke about love and partnership while I calculated how many hours of my teaching career had gone into funding this 20-minute performance. The vows were traditional, pretty words about forever that felt hollow when I remembered being told I'd be seated with distant cousins to avoid embarrassing the important guests. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, everyone stood and applauded. Vanessa and Kevin kissed, then walked back down the aisle together, her dress catching the golden afternoon light. They passed my row without a glance, already focused on the receiving line where the Hartley family's connections waited to offer congratulations and business cards. The cocktail hour took place on the mansion's terrace. I wandered among strangers holding champagne flutes, feeling like a ghost at my own son's wedding. Occasionally someone would ask how I knew the couple, and I'd say I was Kevin's mother, watching their expressions shift from polite interest to awkward confusion when they couldn't reconcile the mother of the groom with my clearance rack dress and obvious discomfort. Diane Hartley held court near the ice sculpture, surrounded by women in clothing that whispered wealth. I caught fragments of her conversation as I passed. Vanessa has such exquisite taste. The venue alone cost more than most people's entire wedding. We're so pleased Kevin found someone who understands the importance of maintaining standards. I moved away before she could see me, finding refuge near the garden wall where the catering staff rushed between the kitchen and service areas. A young woman in a black uniform offered me a tray of appetizers. Each tiny bite probably cost what I'd spent on groceries last week. "Ma'am, are you all right?" she asked quietly, noting my expression. "Just tired," I lied. "It's been a long day." She nodded sympathetically. "I work a lot of these fancy weddings. The families can be rough." She glanced toward the terrace where laughter echoed. For what it's worth, you look like you deserve better than standing out here alone. Her kindness nearly undid me. I thanked her and made my way back toward the crowd, determined to maintain my dignity through the reception at least. The ballroom doors opened at 6, and guests flooded in to find their seats. I located my table exactly where Vanessa had promised. Near the service entrance, tucked behind a decorative screen, with a partial view of the gardens through a side window. My tablemates were indeed Kevin's cousins from the Appalachian region, Frank's brother's children. They greeted me warmly, clearly as confused about their placement as I was insulted by mine. "Dorothy, good to see you," said Frank's nephew James, a coal miner with kind eyes and calloused hands. "Though I gotta say, seems strange we're all stuck back here. You're the mother of the groom." "It's complicated," I said, which was the truth. The head table sat on a raised platform at the front of the ballroom. Kevin and Vanessa held center position, flanked by the bridal party and both sets of parents. Except only 3 parents sat at that table. Gregory and Diane beamed beside their daughter, leaning in to chat with the bridesmaids. The seat where a mother of the groom should have been remained conspicuously empty, a gap that announced to the 150 guests that something was wrong with this picture. Dinner service began with the head table, naturally. Course after course of carefully plated food arrived while our table near the service entrance waited. We watched servers carry trays past us, heading to the important people first. By the time our salads arrived, the head table was finishing their entrees. "This is some bullshit," muttered James's sister Rebecca, a nurse who'd driven 4 hours to attend. "You paid for most of this wedding, didn't you?" I didn't answer, but my face must have said enough. "Frank would be ashamed," she said quietly. "Kevin letting them treat you like this." The speeches began during dessert service. Preston stood first, champagne glass raised, launching into a polished toast about Vanessa's accomplishments and Kevin's good fortune in marrying into such a distinguished family. He spoke about their future, their potential, the doors that would open for Kevin now that he was a Hartley by marriage. He never mentioned me once. Gregory followed with stories about Vanessa's childhood, her private school achievements, her refined tastes that Kevin was lucky to now share. He welcomed Kevin to the family with the magnanimous air of a king granting favor to a commoner. The guests laughed at his jokes and applauded his paternal pride. Then Kevin stood to thank everyone. I leaned forward despite myself, hoping for acknowledgement, for some small recognition that I existed beyond the shadows they'd relegated me to. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible day," Kevin began, his architect's training evident in his confident presentation. "Vanessa, you've made me the happiest man alive. To your parents, Gregory and Diane, thank you for welcoming me into your remarkable family and for your generous support in making today perfect." He raised his glass toward the Hartleys, and the room erupted in applause. My hands stayed frozen in my lap. Kevin continued talking about Vanessa's grace, her sophistication, how she'd elevated him, improved him, made him into someone worthy of this gathering. He thanked the bridal party, thanked the wedding planner, thanked the venue staff. Then he concluded with "I'm grateful to everyone who helped make this day possible," and sat down to enthusiastic applause. Everyone who helped. A generic phrase that acknowledged no one and nothing. As if the money had materialized from thin air, as if my sacrifices were invisible as the labor that had funded his gratitude. Rebecca touched my arm. "Dorothy, we can leave. You don't have to stay for this." But I did have to stay. Because leaving would mean accepting that I'd been successfully erased from my own son's milestone, and something in me refused to grant them that satisfaction. So I sat through the cake cutting, through the choreographed first dance, through the party that followed where guests moved to the open bar and dance floor while I remained at my hidden table like a shameful secret. Around 8 o'clock, a commotion near the entrance caught my attention. A woman I didn't recognize stood arguing with Amanda Cross, the wedding planner. Their voices rose over the music, drawing attention from nearby guests. "I was told there would be room for the Vanderbilt party," the woman was saying. Gregory Hartley personally assured me. Amanda checked her tablet, flustered. "I apologize, but we're at capacity. Fire code restrictions." The woman's face flushed with anger. Do you understand who my husband is? We drove 2 hours for this wedding. We're not standing in the hallway. I watched Amanda scan the ballroom, her eyes landing on my table near the service entrance. I saw her calculate the solution immediately. The hidden table with the groom's mother and country relatives. The expendable guests. She walked purposefully toward us, professional smile fixed in place. Excuse me, Dorothy? Could I speak with you privately for a moment? I followed her to the hallway, already knowing what was coming. We have a small situation. Some very important guests of the Hartleys arrived unexpectedly, and we need to accommodate them. Your table has the most flexibility for relocation. Relocation where? Amanda gestured vaguely toward the terrace. There are lovely cocktail tables outside. You'd still be part of the celebration, just in a different space. You want to move the mother of the groom and his family outside to make room for unexpected guests? Her smile never wavered. It's just a temporary adjustment. The terrace has wonderful views. Something crystallized in that moment. The months of financial bleeding, the dismissive phone calls, the back corner seating, the erasure from Kevin's speech, and now this. The final insult wrapped in Amanda's professional pleasantness. No, I said simply. Amanda blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. I won't be relocated. If the Hartleys need more room, perhaps they should ask some of their important business associates to step outside. Dorothy, please be reasonable. This is already an awkward situation. You're absolutely right. I picked up my purse from the chair where I'd left it. This is incredibly awkward. Which is why I'll solve the problem by leaving entirely. I walked back to my table where Frank's relatives sat waiting. Thank you for your company tonight. I'm sorry you drove so far to be treated as an afterthought. We're coming with you, Rebecca announced, standing immediately. James and the others followed her lead, a small exodus from the forgotten table. Amanda's professional composure finally cracked. Please, if you'd just wait a moment. But we were already moving toward the exit, a group of 7 people the Hartley family had deemed unimportant enough to discard. As we passed through the ballroom, other guests noticed the movement. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Then I saw him. Officer Marcus Webb, one of the security guards hired for the event, moving to intercept us. He positioned himself between our group and the exit, hand raised in a stopping gesture. Excuse me, folks. Is there a problem here? No problem, I said calmly. We're simply leaving. I'm going to need you to return to your seats. He spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to compliance. We can't have guests disrupting the event. We're not disrupting anything. We're departing. Ma'am, I don't think you understand. He stepped closer, his bulk intimidating. You need to go back to your table or leave quietly through the service entrance without causing a scene. The service entrance. Where the staff and suppliers came and went. Where people like us belonged. Rebecca moved forward, her nurse's instinct to protect kicking in. She's the mother of the groom. You can't seriously be throwing her out. I have my orders, Officer Webb said flatly. These guests are causing a disturbance. They need to be removed from the premises immediately. Orders. Someone had given orders to have us removed. I scanned the ballroom and found Vanessa watching from the head table, her face tight with anger. Beside her, Diane Hartley leaned in, whispering something that made Vanessa nod sharply. Gregory stood, his expression dark as he moved toward us with purposeful strides. Officer, ensure these people exit immediately. They're disrupting my daughter's wedding. My daughter's wedding. Not my son's wedding. Not Kevin's wedding. Just Vanessa's, as if Kevin were merely an accessory to her special day. Officer Webb reached for my arm. Let's go, ma'am. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. His fingers closed around my elbow, firm and commanding. The ballroom had gone quiet now, 150 guests watching the drama unfold. Somewhere in that crowd, Kevin sat at the head table, watching security manhandle his mother while doing nothing to stop it. I met Officer Webb's eyes and smiled. A real smile, the first genuine expression I'd worn all day. "Remove your hand from my arm." Something in my tone made him hesitate. "Ma'am, I don't want to have to physically escort you." "Then don't." I pulled free of his grip with surprising strength. "I'll leave on my own. Through the front entrance, like a guest, not through your service door like trash." I walked toward the main ballroom doors, Frank's family following behind me like an honor guard. Officer Webb shadowed us, making sure we actually departed. Other guests parted to let us through, their faces showing confusion and second-hand embarrassment. As I reached the threshold, I turned back one final time. The beautiful ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and silk-draped walls. The head table where my son sat beside his new wife, both of them watching me leave. The Hartley family clustered together, satisfied they'd removed the embarrassment from their perfect day. I pulled out my phone and took a single photograph. Not of the decor or the happy couple, but of the scene itself. The security guard who'd grabbed me. The Hartleys looking triumphant. The empty chair at the head table where I should have been. Then I walked out into the spring evening, breathing air that felt cleaner than anything inside that gilded ballroom. Behind me, I heard the DJ restart the music, the party resuming as if nothing had happened. 7 inconvenient people successfully erased from the celebration. Rebecca touched my shoulder as we reached the parking area. "What now?" "Now," I said, unlocking my car with hands that didn't shake despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "now I make some phone calls." I drove away from Maymont Estate while the reception continued without me. In my rearview mirror, the historic mansion glowed with warm light and fall celebration. Inside, my son danced with his new wife, probably relieved his embarrassing mother had been dealt with efficiently. They had no idea what was coming. But they would learn soon enough that when you treat someone like they're worthless, you shouldn't be surprised when they stop paying your bills. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes after returning home, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel while my heart rate gradually returned to normal. The lavender dress that Vanessa had approved suddenly felt like a costume I couldn't wait to shed. Through my living room window, I could see the lamp Frank had refinished during our second year of marriage, still burning on the end table where I'd left it that morning when the world had been different. Inside, I kicked off the sensible shoes and stood barefoot on the hardwood floors Frank and I had installed ourselves one summer, learning as we went from library books and stubborn determination. That floor had survived 23 years of family life. It would survive this too. My phone sat silent on the kitchen counter where I'd left it, deliberately avoiding the flood of notifications I knew would be waiting. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages. I ignored them all and opened my laptop instead, pulling up the folder I'd created 3 months ago when I'd first started feeling uneasy about the wedding expenses. Documentation. Every teacher knew the power of documentation. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every text message requesting money. I'd been keeping records without consciously admitting to myself why I might need them. Now I understood. Some part of me had known this moment was coming. The wedding venue deposit. $15,000 from my pension withdrawal, confirmed by the email receipt from Maymont Estate. The engagement ring upgrade receipt from Schwarzschild Jewelers, showing my credit card payment of $8,500. The Bali honeymoon booking confirmation, $12,000 charged to the same card. Graduate school tuition payments, documented semester by semester through the VCU Bursar's office portal. I opened a new spreadsheet and began entering data with the methodical precision of 40 years in education. Date, amount, purpose, method of payment. Each row represented another piece of my financial stability sacrificed for a son who'd watched security escort me from his wedding without saying a word. The townhouse down payment proved trickier to document since I'd written a personal check, but I had the bank statement showing the $45,000 withdrawal, dated the same week as their closing. I pulled up the property records from the City of Richmond website, confirming Kevin and Vanessa as the owners of the Fan District townhouse. Public record, freely available to anyone who knew where to look. The monthly loans presented a pattern so clear it needed no explanation. $1,200, every month, for 48 months. Sometimes labeled as gifts in my records, other times as loans. I had text messages from Kevin promising to pay me back when things got better, when he got his promotion, when Vanessa's freelance design work picked up. Promises that evaporated like morning fog, replaced by new requests before the old debts were ever acknowledged. By midnight, I had everything organized in a single document. $228,300 in documented support over 4 years. I saved it with a simple file name, Kevin Financial History. Then I made the first phone call. Beverly Chin answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Dorothy? What's wrong? I heard about the wedding. Ruth called me. Of course Ruth had called. My sister had probably heard about the security incident from Frank's nephew James within an hour of it happening. Small families had their advantages. Bev, I need your help with something. Your nephew still works at the Richmond Times-Dispatch, doesn't he? Marcus? He's a staff photographer there. Why? I need to know if they'd be interested in a story about wedding industry exploitation. How vendors and venues enable financial abuse when families use emotional manipulation to fund extravagant celebrations. Beverly went quiet for a moment. You're going nuclear. I'm going honest. There's a difference. Send me what you have. I'll talk to Marcus tomorrow. He knows people in the features department. The second call went to Patricia Sanderson, an attorney who'd attended the same church as Frank and me for 15 years. She'd handled our wills after his diagnosis, had hugged me at his funeral, had checked in periodically over the years to make sure I was managing. Patricia, I'm sorry to call so late. I need advice about financial elder abuse. She shifted immediately into professional mode. Are you safe? Do you need immediate assistance? I'm safe. But I need to understand my legal options regarding money I've given my son under false pretenses. Tell me everything. I talked for 30 minutes, walking her through the timeline, the amounts, the promises of repayment, the gradual escalation from occasional help to systematic extraction. She listened without interrupting, making notes I could hear through the phone. Dorothy, this is complicated. Family loans are difficult to pursue legally unless you have written agreements. But there are options. She paused, choosing words carefully. The more important question is what outcome you actually want. Do you want your money back, or do you want Kevin to understand what he's done? I want consequences. Real ones. Not just hurt feelings or strained relationships. I want him to feel the weight of his choices the way I've felt the weight of mine. Then we need to be strategic. Document everything, which it sounds like you've already started. I want copies of all your records by Monday. We'll explore whether any of this constitutes undue influence or exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I'm not vulnerable. You're a 67-year-old widow on a fixed income. Legally, that puts you in a protected category. Patricia's voice softened. And Dorothy? What happened at that wedding tonight? That's not just financial abuse. That's emotional cruelty. Sometimes the best revenge is making sure people see the truth. The third call didn't happen until Sunday morning. I'd slept surprisingly well, exhausted from emotion and empowered by action. When I woke, I made coffee, ate actual breakfast for the first time in months instead of skipping it to save money, and waited until a reasonable hour. Gregory Hartley's personal cell phone number had been in my contacts since the engagement, save the night he'd insisted I program it in case I ever needed to reach him about Kevin. He'd made a show of it at a family dinner, presenting it as magnanimous accessibility while Diane looked unapprovingly. I'm here for my future son-in-law's family, he'd said, as if Kevin's family meant more than just me. I dialed at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, knowing it would interrupt their post-wedding brunch or recovery mimosas or whatever rituals wealthy people performed the day after successfully humiliating someone beneath their station. Gregory answered on the fourth ring, voice heavy with irritation. Who is this? Dorothy Mitchell. Kevin's mother. The woman your security guard physically removed from the wedding last night. Silence. Then, measured and cold, Dorothy. I think you and I understand each other. There's no need for further contact between our families beyond what Kevin and Vanessa choose to facilitate. You're absolutely right. I kept my voice pleasant, conversational. We understand each other perfectly. Which is why I wanted to let you know I've filed a police report about the assault. Assault? His voice sharpened. Officer Webb was doing his job. You were causing a disturbance. Actually, 7 guests were quietly leaving a wedding reception where they'd been treated as second-class attendees. Your security guard put his hands on me without provocation and threatened me with physical removal. That's assault and battery under Virginia law. I've already provided my statement to Richmond Police, along with the photos I took documenting the incident. This is absurd. You're being vindictive because your feelings were hurt. My feelings are irrelevant, Gregory. The law is what matters. I'm also filing complaints with Maimon Estate about their security protocols and exploring whether having guests physically removed from a paid event constitutes breach of contract. I understand you have business relationships throughout Richmond. I'm sure the negative publicity won't affect those at all. Another pause, longer this time. What do you want? I want you to know that when you treat people as disposable, sometimes they stop cooperating with your narrative. I hung up before he could respond, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone immediately exploded with activity. Text messages from Kevin, incoherent and panicked. Calls from Vanessa. A voicemail from Diane Hartley's strained voice explaining that this was all a misunderstanding that I was clearly too emotional to process rationally. I turned the phone to silent and returned to my laptop. Beverly had already responded to my email from the night before. Marcus says the features editor is very interested. They want to interview you this week. Also, there's a Facebook group for parents dealing with entitled adult children. Might be worth connecting with them. I clicked the link Beverly had included, finding a private group with over 3,000 members. Parents sharing stories of financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, estrangement after years of sacrifice. I wasn't alone. This pattern played out in families across the country, hidden behind closed doors and shame about admitting your own child had used you. I requested to join the group and began reading posts while my coffee went cold. Story after story of parents bankrupted by weddings, by grandchildren's expenses, by adult children who'd learned that guilt was a currency their parents couldn't refuse to spend. And story after story of parents who'd finally said enough. By noon, the doorbell started ringing. I ignored it, watching through the window as Kevin paced on my front porch, eventually leaving after 20 minutes of knocking. Vanessa's car appeared an hour later, idling at the curb while she texted furiously, but she never got out. Apparently, actually confronting me in person was beneath her. Ruth called from Charleston around 2. The family's losing their minds. James said Kevin showed up at his hotel this morning looking for you, asking what you were planning. I'm not planning anything. I'm simply stopping the lies. Good. Ruth's voice was fierce with approval. Frank would be proud of you, Dot. He always said you were stronger than you gave yourself credit for. I should have been strong 4 years ago. Before I gave them everything. Maybe. Or maybe you needed to give everything so you'd finally understand what it felt like to have nothing left to take. Now you can build something for yourself instead of someone who doesn't appreciate it. After Ruth hung up, I opened my photo gallery and looked at the picture I'd taken while leaving the wedding. Officer Webb's hand on my arm. Gregory Hartley's satisfied expression. The empty chair at the head table. And Kevin, visible in the background, watching it all happen without intervening. I uploaded the photo to my computer and opened it in editing software, not to alter it but to annotate it. I added text boxes identifying each person, noting the context, creating a visual record that told the story without requiring explanation. Then I saved it to the same folder as my financial documentation. Evidence. Teachers understood the importance of showing your work, of providing proof that couldn't be dismissed or reframed. I had receipts, bank statements, text messages, and photographs. I had everything needed to tell the truth in a way that couldn't be ignored. Monday morning arrived with a certified letter in my mailbox. I recognized the law firm's return address before I even opened it. Gregory Hartley hadn't wasted time securing legal representation. The letter threatened a defamation lawsuit if I continued making false accusations about the wedding incident. It demanded I cease all contact with the Hartley family and retract any statements I'd made to law enforcement. It suggested I seek counseling for what they termed age-related emotional instability and poor judgment. I photographed the letter front and back, added it to my documentation folder, and forwarded copies to Patricia Sanderson. Then I made myself lunch, ate it slowly, and got dressed for my interview with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Marcus Chin met me in the newspaper's lobby, a younger version of his Aunt Beverly with the same sharp intelligence in his eyes. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. My editor is very interested in this story." He led me to a conference room where a woman in her 40s sat with a notebook and recording device. "I'm Rachel Torres, features editor. I understand you have documentation of financial exploitation related to a wedding. I have documentation of how the wedding industry enables family dysfunction when no one wants to ask where the money is actually coming from." I spent 2 hours walking Rachel and Marcus through everything. The timeline of requests, the escalating amounts, the emotional manipulation, the final humiliation of being ejected from the celebration I'd funded. Rachel took notes steadily, occasionally asking clarifying questions, never showing shock but clearly understanding the pattern. "This happens more than people realize," Rachel said when I finished. "Adult children financially draining their aging parents while maintaining lifestyles they can't afford. The wedding angle makes it newsworthy, but the real story is systemic elder exploitation hiding behind family obligation." "Can you use real names?" "With your permission and proper documentation, yes. We'd need to verify the major claims independently, but public records should confirm most of it." She looked at me steadily. "Ms. Mitchell, once this publishes, your relationship with your son will likely never recover. Are you prepared for that? I've already lost my son. This just makes it official." Marcus raised his camera. "May I take your photo for the article?" I thought of Vanessa's instruction to wear pastels and stay invisible. I thought of the back corner table and the service entrance exit and the empty chair at the head table. "Yes," I said. "I want people to see my face when they read about what happened." He took several shots, professional and dignified. Then Rachel walked me to the lobby, promising the story would run within the week pending legal review. I drove home through Richmond streets that felt different somehow. Cleaner. Clearer. The weight I'd been carrying had begun to lift, not because I'd gotten revenge but because I'd finally stopped protecting people who'd never protected me. My phone showed 43 missed calls and 67 text messages. I'd check them eventually. But first, I had one more thing to do. I opened my laptop and began writing an email to every person who'd attended the wedding. The Hartley family's business associates, Kevin's architect colleagues, Vanessa's sorority sisters, everyone whose email I could find through social media and professional networks. The subject line was simple: the real cost of the Mitchell-Hartley wedding. In the body, I attached my financial documentation and a brief explanation. I didn't editorialize or accuse. I simply presented the facts and let people draw their own conclusions about a family that would take $228,000 from a widow and then have her physically removed from the celebration when she became inconvenient. I hovered over the send button for exactly 5 seconds. Then I clicked it and watched the email disappear into the digital universe, carrying truth like a virus that would spread through the Hartley family's carefully constructed social network. The consequences were just beginning. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one paying the price. The email responses started arriving within hours. Most came from people I'd never met, wedding guests who'd attended out of obligation to the Hartley family's social standing. Their replies ranged from shocked support to uncomfortable silence, but the silence itself spoke volumes. When people couldn't defend what they'd witnessed, their lack of response became its own form of acknowledgement. One message stood out: sent at 2 in the morning from an address I didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Preston Hartley's assistant at the investment firm. I was at the wedding and saw what happened to you. I've watched the Hartley family operate for 3 years now, and what they did to you is consistent with how they treat anyone they consider beneath them. Your email gave me the courage to start documenting my own experiences with workplace exploitation. Thank you for speaking up. I saved that message in a separate folder, a reminder that exposing truth often gave permission to others carrying similar burdens. My story wasn't unique. It was just finally being told. Tuesday morning brought the real explosion. Rachel Torres called at 7, her voice tight with professional excitement barely contained. Dorothy, the story runs tomorrow in print and goes live online tonight. I wanted to give you advance warning because the response is already significant. We've had over 100 people share similar stories since word started spreading about the article. This is resonating. How bad will the backlash be? Honestly, it'll be brutal from the Hartley family and anyone invested in their reputation. But you'll have support too. The comments section is going to be a war zone, so I'd suggest not reading it. Focus on the people reaching out directly. She was right about the war zone. The article went live at 6 that evening, and my phone became unusable within minutes. Texts, calls, voicemails flooding in faster than I could process. I turned it off entirely and opened my laptop instead, watching the story spread across social media like wildfire. The headline read, "Local widow financially drained by son's wedding, then removed by security." Rachel had written it with surgical precision, presenting facts without editorial commentary, letting the documented evidence speak for itself. The photo Marcus had taken showed me in my living room, dignified and calm, with Frank's picture visible on the mantel behind me. The article detailed every financial transaction with dates and amounts. It included portions of text messages from Kevin requesting money, always urgent, always essential. It quoted from Vanessa's emails about maintaining proper appearances and meeting family standards. Most damning, it featured the photo I'd taken while being escorted from the wedding, security guard's hand on my arm, Hartley family watching with satisfaction. Within 2 hours, the story had been shared over 5,000 times. Local news stations picked it up for their evening broadcasts. A radio talk show host invited me for an interview. The Richmond Times-Dispatch website crashed temporarily from traffic overload. Then the counter-narrative began. Gregory Hartley released a statement through his attorney, painting me as a mentally unstable woman unable to accept that her son had built a life independent of her control. He suggested I'd made the financial gifts willingly and was now bitter about natural family boundaries. He claimed I'd become belligerent at the wedding, forcing security to intervene for everyone's safety. Diane Hartley took to her Instagram, posting a carefully composed message about the pain of being falsely accused and the tragedy of elder mental health issues that families must navigate with compassion. Her post featured a photo of Vanessa looking tearfully vulnerable, with the caption, "When love isn't enough and truth gets weaponized." Vanessa's statement appeared on Facebook, shared to her network of thousands. She wrote about the agony of being targeted by someone she tried so hard to include, despite fundamental incompatibilities in values and lifestyle. She mentioned my inappropriate behavior at family gatherings, my inability to respect their boundaries, my growing paranoia as I aged alone without proper support systems. The Hartleys were good at this. They had money, platforms, and years of practice crafting public narratives. Their statements spread through their social networks, creating an alternate version of events where I was the villain and they were suffering victims of my vindictive behavior. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed their word would carry more weight than documented proof. Wednesday morning, Beverly arrived at my house with coffee and determination. "We're going on offense. Marcus says there's a TV station that wants to interview you live this afternoon. Local evening news, good ratings, sympathetic anchor. I can't do television. I teach elementary school. I taught elementary school. I'm not equipped for media combat. You don't need to be. You just need to tell the truth and show the receipts." Beverly pulled out her phone, showing me the comments section on the newspaper's website that I had been avoiding. "Look at this." I scrolled through hundreds of comments. Yes, some defended the Hartleys or suggested I was bitter and vengeful. But far more came from people sharing their own stories of being financially exploited by family members, of sacrificing their security only to be discarded when they became inconvenient. Message after message validating what I'd experienced, confirming I wasn't alone or crazy or wrong. One comment from a user named Mike's Mom 2019 read, "My son's fiancé convinced him to cut me out of their lives after I'd paid for his medical school. I blamed myself for years, thought I'd somehow failed him." Reading Dorothy's story made me realize I wasn't the failure. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. Another from Carol B. 47, "I'm a wedding planner. I've watched this exact scenario play out dozens of times. Parents bankrupting themselves while entitled couples treat them like vendors instead of family. The industry enables this by never asking where money comes from, only that payment clears. Dorothy is exposing something venues don't want acknowledged." I agreed to the television interview. Beverly drove me to the station, coaching me during the drive. "Stay calm, stick to facts, don't get emotional no matter what they ask. You're not angry, you're disappointed. You're not vengeful, you're establishing boundaries. Let them see the teacher, not the victim." The anchor, a woman named Stephanie Crawford in her 50s, greeted me warmly in the green room. "I read your story. My mother went through something similar with my brother. She never fought back like you are. I admire your strength." The interview aired live at 5:30, scheduled for maximum viewership. Stephanie opened by summarizing the newspaper article, then turned to me with practiced sympathy. "Dorothy, walk us through what happened at your son's wedding reception." I'd been seated away from family in a back area near service entrances. When unexpected guests arrived and the venue needed space, the wedding planner asked us to move outside. When we chose to leave instead, security physically removed us from the building on orders from the bride's father. "And you'd financially supported this wedding substantially?" "I'd contributed over $200,000 to my son and his wife over 4 years, including significant wedding expenses. That support came from my late husband's life insurance, my retirement savings, and a reverse mortgage on our family home." Stephanie's expression showed genuine shock even though she'd read the article. "Your entire financial security. Everything my husband and I had built in 40 years of teaching. I gave it believing I was helping my son build his future. Instead, I funded a lifestyle I was eventually deemed unworthy to participate in. The Hartley family has released statements suggesting you have mental health issues and became aggressive at the wedding. How do you respond?" "I have documentation for every claim I've made. Bank statements, receipts, text messages, emails. I'd be happy to provide all of it to anyone who questions its validity. As for mental health, I've been evaluated by my physician and found completely competent." That narrative is an attempt to discredit someone who's finally stopped enabling exploitation. What do you want people to understand from your experience? "I want parents to know they're not obligated to bankrupt themselves to prove they love their children. I want adult children to understand that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional funding. And I want the wedding industry to acknowledge its role in creating situations where families destroy themselves financially for one day of appearance over substance." The interview lasted 12 minutes. Stephanie concluded by displaying the newspaper article's web address and suggesting viewers read the full investigation. As the camera cut away, she reached across and squeezed my hand. "You did beautifully. Your husband would be proud." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The news station's switchboard lit up with calls. Social media exploded with people sharing the interview clip. By 9 that evening, my story had spread beyond Richmond, picked up by regional news outlets and parenting blogs. A national morning show reached out requesting an interview for Friday. Kevin finally broke his silence Thursday afternoon with a text message that came through when I briefly turned my phone on to check messages. "Mom, please stop. You're destroying my marriage and my career. Vanessa's family is furious. I'm being ostracized at work because of the publicity. This needs to end now. We can talk privately if you'll just make it stop. I stared at that message for a long time, parsing each sentence for any hint of apology or accountability. There was none. Only concern for his marriage, his career, his social standing. The same priorities that had led him to watch security remove me from his wedding without intervention. I typed back a single sentence: "I'll stop when you return the $228,000 you took from my retirement." His response came within seconds. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "Exactly," I replied. "Neither did I. But I gave it to you anyway because you're my son. Now you understand what it feels like to have someone demand the impossible." He didn't respond again. I turned the phone back off and returned to the stack of letters that had started arriving at my house. Physical letters, handwritten on actual paper, from people across the region sharing their stories. A 73-year-old man who'd given his daughter's family $80,000 only to be excluded from his granddaughter's life when he couldn't provide more. A widow who'd depleted her savings for a son's business venture, then discovered him vacationing in Europe while she ate ramen noodles. Story after story of love weaponized into exploitation, of sacrifice met with entitlement, of parents treated as resources rather than people. I answered every letter personally, writing by hand because these stories deserved more than typed responses. "You're not alone," I wrote again and again. "You weren't wrong to love your children. They were wrong to abuse that love." Friday brought the national morning show interview via satellite from the Richmond news station. The hosts approached it as a human interest story about family dynamics and wedding culture. They asked softer questions than Stephanie had, more focused on emotions than facts, but the impact remained significant. By noon, I'd received interview requests from 3 podcasts, 2 online magazines, and a literary agent interested in whether I'd consider writing a book. A book? The idea seemed absurd until Beverly pointed out how many people were desperate for permission to set boundaries with exploitative family members. Your story gives them that permission. It shows them they can survive losing people who never really valued them anyway. The weekend brought an unexpected development. A Facebook group formed called Dorothy's Army, created by strangers who'd been following my story. They collected similar experiences, offered support to people going through family financial exploitation, and coordinated sending letters to wedding venues and planners demanding transparency about source of funds. One member posted, "I was about to take out a loan to pay for my daughter's destination wedding. Reading about Dorothy made me realize I don't have to destroy my retirement to prove I love her. I told my daughter she needs to plan a wedding she can afford herself. She's angry now, but Dorothy showed me that's okay. Her anger is better than my bankruptcy." The group grew to over 8,000 members in 72 hours. They changed their profile photo to the picture of me from the newspaper article, turning my face into a symbol of resistance against family exploitation. I joined the group anonymously, reading their stories late into each night, overwhelmed by how widespread this pattern had become. Monday arrived with certified mail from Gregory Hartley's attorney, a new letter threatening legal action if I continued granting interviews or making public statements that damaged their family's reputation. They demanded I cease all media contact, delete social media posts, and issue a public apology acknowledging I'd misrepresented events due to age-related confusion. Patricia Sanderson laughed when I forwarded it to her. "They're panicking. Everything you've said is documented truth, which means they have no defamation case. This is intimidation, nothing more. How do you want to respond?" "I want to hold a press conference." Patricia went quiet. "That's escalating significantly. Once you do that, there's no walking it back. You'll be permanently associated with this story." "Good. Maybe the next parent will see what I did and find courage to stop the exploitation before they lose everything." We scheduled the press conference for Wednesday at the Richmond Public Library, a neutral public space that couldn't be controlled by either party. Patricia helped me prepare a statement focusing on 3 key points: the documented financial exploitation, the wedding industry's complicity in enabling family dysfunction, and the need for legal protections for elders being pressured by adult children. Tuesday night, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Amanda Cross. I was the wedding planner for Kevin's ceremony. I remember. You asked me to relocate outside so unexpected guests could have my table." She took a shaky breath. "I'm calling to apologize and to tell you something important. Gregory Hartley paid me an additional $5,000 beyond the planning fee to ensure you were, in his words, managed appropriately during the event. He specified you should be seated away from prominent guests and removed quietly if you caused any issues. I should have refused. I'm sorry. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've been a wedding planner for 12 years, and I've watched this exact pattern dozens of times. Parents funding celebrations they can't afford, getting treated as embarrassments by families who took their money. I enabled it by staying silent. After reading your story, I can't do that anymore. Would you be willing to make a statement at a press conference?" "Yes. If it helps prevent one more parent from being exploited the way you were, I'll testify to everything I've seen." Wednesday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed in the same outfit I'd worn for the television interview, wanting consistency across media appearances. Beverly drove me to the library, where a crowd had already gathered. News cameras, reporters, and at least 50 members of Dorothy's Army wearing handmade t-shirts that read, "Financial abuse is still abuse." Patricia stood at a podium set up on the library steps, microphone ready. Behind her, Amanda Cross waited nervously along with Marcus Chen, who'd photographed the original article. I joined them, looking out at the crowd of strangers who'd shown up to support someone they'd never met. Patricia opened by reading a prepared statement summarizing the legal issues around financial elder exploitation and the difficulty of prosecution when victims are related to perpetrators. Then she introduced Amanda, who delivered her testimony about being paid to keep me away from prominent guests. When my turn came, I stepped to the microphone and pulled out the single page I'd prepared. I didn't plan to read it verbatim, but having it helped steady my hands. "My name is Dorothy Mitchell. I'm a retired elementary school teacher, a widow, and a mother who spent 4 years being systematically exploited by people I loved. I'm here today not for revenge, but for truth. The wedding industry profits from family dysfunction by never questioning source of funds. Venues and planners facilitate financial abuse when they accept money from elderly parents who can't afford their services but can't refuse without seeming unloving. I funded a wedding that cost more than my annual pension, then was physically removed from the celebration for becoming inconvenient. This happened because we've created a culture where one day of performance matters more than years of sacrifice." I looked up from my notes at the cameras recording every word. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm demanding accountability. If my story helps one parent set boundaries before they lose everything, if it makes one adult child consider whether they're asking too much, if it forces one wedding vendor to question where money is really coming from, then being publicly humiliated was worth it." The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. I answered them calmly, sticking to documented facts, refusing to be drawn into emotional speculation about Kevin's motives or character. Then someone in the crowd called out a question that silenced everyone. "Ms. Mitchell, do you regret having your son?" The question hung in the spring air while cameras focused on my face, waiting for the soundbite that would define this entire story. I thought of Kevin as a baby, as a child, as a young man full of promise before Vanessa's family convinced him that his mother was something to be ashamed of. I don't regret Kevin. I regret allowing myself to be treated as disposable by someone I would have died for. Those are different things. That became the quote that spread farthest, the statement that resonated deepest. By evening, it appeared on social media, in news articles, in conversations happening across the country about family obligation and parental sacrifice. The Hartley family issued no response. Their silence was more telling than any statement could have been. When you build your defense on attacking someone's credibility, and that person provides overwhelming documentation of truth, there's nothing left to say. Kevin called that night. I'd turned my phone back on to check messages and his number appeared immediately. I considered ignoring it, but after everything that had happened, I needed to hear what he'd say now that the whole city knew what he'd done. "Mom. His voice cracked on the word. Can we please talk in person? I looked around my living room, at Frank's refinished lamp and our self-installed floors and the photos on the mantle of a life built through genuine partnership rather than exploitation. Yes, I said. You know where I live. Come alone. He arrived within 20 minutes, which meant he'd been waiting nearby hoping I'd answer. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. The confident architect who'd stood beside Vanessa accepting congratulations had been replaced by someone who looked hollowed out and desperate. Come in, I said, stepping aside. We have a lot to discuss. Kevin sat on my couch, the same spot where he'd sat countless times growing up, back when this house had been his safe place rather than a resource to extract value from. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of public scrutiny and consequences finally catching up to choices he'd made in private. I settled into Frank's old recliner across from him, maintaining distance that felt both physical and emotional. We sat in silence for a long moment, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid over 4 years of slowly deteriorating respect. Mom, I don't know where to start. His voice was barely above a whisper. I've been watching everything unfold online, reading the comments, seeing how people view me now. I never thought about it from your perspective until everyone started pointing out what I couldn't see. What couldn't you see, Kevin? That I was treating you like a bank instead of a person. That Vanessa's family convinced me you were an embarrassment when you were actually the only one who genuinely cared about my happiness. That I stood there and watched security put their hands on you without saying a word because I was more afraid of disappointing them than protecting you. Tears ran down his face, and I felt the familiar maternal instinct to comfort him, to tell him it was okay and we'd find a way through this together. But I'd spent 4 years responding to that instinct while he learned nothing from my forgiveness except that there would always be another chance. Kevin, do you understand that I don't have retirement savings anymore? That I took a reverse mortgage on this house, the home your father and I built together, to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford? That I've been skipping medications because I couldn't pay for them after sending you $1,200 every month? His face crumpled. I didn't know about the medications. I thought you had plenty saved from Dad's insurance. You thought wrong because you never asked. You just kept requesting and I kept giving because that's what mothers do. Except at some point, love became exploitation and you never noticed the difference. Vanessa's family, they made me feel like I had to keep up certain standards. Like if I couldn't provide a particular lifestyle, I wasn't good enough for her. Gregory would talk about business opportunities for men who presented well, who belonged to the right clubs, who lived in the right neighborhoods. I felt trapped. So you chose their approval over my financial security. I kept my voice level, matter of fact. You chose appearance over integrity. Those were your choices, Kevin. Not Vanessa's, not her parents, yours. He nodded miserably. I know that now. The marriage is falling apart anyway. Vanessa's furious about the publicity. Her parents won't speak to me. The architectural firm suggested I take a leave of absence until things settle down. Everything I sacrificed your security for is crumbling anyway. Good, I said simply. He looked up, shocked. Good? Mom, my life is destroyed. Your life is getting honest. There's a difference. You built something on a foundation of exploitation and lies. It was always going to collapse eventually. Better now than after you'd taken everything I had left. Is there any way to fix this? Any way we can go back? I leaned forward, needing him to really hear what I was about to say. We can't go back, Kevin. That relationship died when you watched security remove me from your wedding. But we might be able to build something new if you're willing to do the work. What kind of work? Real accountability. Not just apologizing because the public humiliation makes you uncomfortable, but genuinely understanding what you did and why it was wrong. Therapy to figure out how you became someone who could treat his mother this way. An actual repayment of what you took, even if it takes you 20 years. I don't have that kind of money. The townhouse is mortgaged. We have credit card debt. Vanessa's shopping habits. Then sell the townhouse. Move somewhere you can actually afford. Get a second job if necessary. Figure out how to live within your means instead of expecting someone else to subsidize your choices. That's what being an adult means. He sat quietly, absorbing the reality that forgiveness wouldn't come cheap or easy this time. Mom, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I truly am sorry for everything. Sorry is a start. Behavior change is what matters. I stood up, signaling the conversation was ending. I need you to leave now. When you're ready to discuss actual restitution plans, we can talk again. But I won't pretend everything is fine just to make you feel better. Kevin stood, hesitating at the door. Do you still love me? The question hung between us, vulnerable and desperate. I thought about lying to spare his feelings, then remembered 4 years of sparing feelings that were never spared in return. I love the son I raised. I don't know the man you became when you started prioritizing status over character. Maybe therapy will help you find him again. Until then, I love who you were and who you might become. But I won't sacrifice myself for who you are right now. He left without another word, and I watched through the window as he drove away in the luxury car he couldn't afford. My phone buzzed with a text from Ruth. How did it go? Honestly, I typed back. For the first time in years, completely honestly. 3 months passed. Summer arrived in Richmond with humidity that made the air feel thick and alive. I spent my days working in the garden Frank and I had planted, now overgrown from years of neglect while I'd poured money elsewhere. The physical labor felt therapeutic, each weed pulled a small victory over the chaos that had consumed my life. The reverse mortgage company and I had worked out a plan. I could stay in the house as long as I lived, but there would be nothing left for Kevin to inherit. That felt appropriate somehow. He'd already taken his inheritance while I was alive. The house would be payment for the privilege. Dorothy's army had grown to over 20,000 members, becoming a genuine support network for people establishing boundaries with exploitative family members. They'd started a scholarship fund in my name for adult children of narcissists seeking therapy they couldn't afford. The irony wasn't lost on me that something positive had emerged from such painful experience. Kevin had followed through on some of his promises. He'd sold the townhouse, moved to a modest apartment, and started therapy twice weekly. He sent me a check for $500 the first month, with a note explaining he'd taken a second job doing residential drafting on weekends. It would take him 38 years to repay what he'd taken, but the gesture mattered more than the timeline. Vanessa had filed for divorce by July, unable to tolerate the drop in lifestyle or the social consequences of being married to Richmond's most infamous son. Kevin seemed relieved rather than devastated, telling me during one of our brief phone calls that he finally understood the difference between love and transaction. The wedding industry had made some changes too. Several venues in Virginia now required disclosure forms for anyone over 60 contributing more than 20% of event costs, with mandatory cooling-off periods before final payments. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I stood in my garden one August evening, watching fireflies drift between tomato plants Frank and I had started from seeds 20 years ago. They still came back every summer, resilient and faithful in ways people rarely managed. My phone rang. Kevin's number. We talked once a week now, brief conversations that stayed surface level but felt more honest than years of deeper discussions had been. Hey Mom. How's the garden? Producing more tomatoes than I can possibly eat. I'll bring some by your apartment this weekend if you'd like. I'd like that. A pause. Mom, I got something in the mail today. An invitation to Thanksgiving at Aunt Ruth's in Charleston. She said you're going. She invited me too, but only if you're comfortable with it. I considered the question carefully. Thanksgiving with Ruth had been wonderful last year, the first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. Adding Kevin would change that dynamic, introduce complexity into something that had finally become simple and easy. But maybe complexity was part of healing. Maybe repairing relationships meant accepting discomfort rather than avoiding it. Come to Thanksgiving, I said. But Kevin, if you show up empty-handed while I bring dishes I cooked, if you expect anyone to make a fuss over you or treat you like you haven't spent 4 years being terrible, if you make this about your comfort instead of rebuilding trust, I will ask you to leave. Do you understand? I understand. I'll bring food. I'll help clean up. I'll prove I've changed instead of just saying it. Good. Then I'll see you there. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch steps, listening to cicadas sing their summer symphony. Frank's absence still ached, probably always would, but I'd learned to carry grief alongside hope instead of being buried by it. The future looked different than I'd imagined 4 years ago. Smaller in some ways, with less money and lower expectations. But larger too, with more dignity, clearer boundaries, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. I'd lost my retirement savings and years of peace. But I'd gained something more valuable. The understanding that I deserved better than being someone's convenient resource. That love without respect was just exploitation wearing a family costume. That saying no to people who demanded everything was saying yes to myself. The fireflies continued their evening dance, unconcerned with human drama or family dysfunction. They simply existed, lighting up the darkness with whatever brightness they possessed, expecting nothing in return. I could learn from that. I already had. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.